Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the March 6th meeting of the Thousand Oaks Council on Aging. I now call the meeting to order. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Number 3 on our agenda, may we have roll call, please?
Please say here present when I call your name. Chair Gorbach.
Here.
Vice Chair Loretta Allen.
Here.
Commissioner Stephen Allen is absent. Commissioner Belding is absent. Commissioner Burt.
Here.
Commissioner Gitt.
Present.
Commissioner Maria.
Here.
Commissioner Mortimer.
Here.
And Commissioner Posta.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And now we are at number 4 on our agenda, public comment. I don't have any public comment cards. Okay, let's go to number 5 on our agenda. These will be liaison and agency reports. I'd like to call on Vice Chair Allen to lead this, please.
Thank you. First, and just remember, commissioners, that I need to call each one of your reports separately. A is the California Senior Legislature, and that'll be reported by Commissioner Gitt.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to talk to you today about the California Senior Legislature. I'm sure that you all know what that is, but in case you don't, let me get to the right set of slides here. The Senior Legislature, California Senior Legislature, was created in 1979, and it's a nonpartisan, standalone state agency that works to enhance the quality of life for older Californians and their families. The CSL consists of 40 senior senators and 80 senior assembly members who are selected from around the state. The California Senior Legislature meets in Sacramento each fall in the chambers and hearing rooms of the state capitol, and the hearings are held where proposals are reviewed and hearings refined and prioritized. Each year, the CSL passes 10 priority legislative proposals, which are then attempted to be picked up by sponsors in the real Senate and Assembly. And we do that every year to enhance the life of seniors. Next slide, please. So I want to go through the 10 proposals that are pending in the legislature this year. The first one is AP 18. It's called Labeling of Prescription Drugs, and this measure would require physicians and surgeons to include the purpose for which the medication is prescribed on all prescriptions, so that the information would be included on the label that is put on the bottle, unless the patient requests that this information be omitted. Some of the medications that we all take have many applications, and you may need to know which one you're taking it for. You would think that this is a no-brainer because most of the doctors just check a box on a computer these days to write prescriptions, but this bill has languished for several years because the California Medical Association thinks it'll increase the workload of doctors too much. It doesn't seem to make any sense when it's so easy to do. Anyway, this one is up for review this year in the House. The second one, AP2, is the Transportation, Seniors and Disabled Individuals Access to Transportation to Medical Services. This measure would provide the use of monies that already exist in the electric program investment charge to fund grant programs in counties to provide transportation to non-emergency medical services for the senior and disabled populations located in rural, desert, and mountain areas through the use of energy renewable vehicles. The next one, SP10, is entitled Financial Elder Abuse Mandated Reporting. This measure would amend the definition of mandated reporters of suspected financial abuse of an elder or dependent fault to include the officers and employees of businesses licensed under the Money Transmission Act for making wire or money transfers that would increase, and it would increase penalties, including providing for full reimbursement of losses for officers or employees of these businesses who fail to report as required. I think many of you have heard about the scams, and this is to make people more responsible for the companies that are actually sending the money around. The next one, SP7, is Veterans Housing, Affordable Rental Housing. This measure would establish a rental housing assistance program and would require the Department of Veterans Affairs to coordinate access to affordable housing with existing state and federal veterans services and provide detailed information about the assistance in a specified resource publication. The next one is Fall Safe Housing. This measure would amend the Building Homes and Jobs Act to ensure that specific falls prevention structural features designed to prevent falls and facilitate aging in place are built into new housing using funds generated by the Act. Next one, AP8, is affordable housing for the elderly. This measure would, for the purpose of meeting housing element goals under the planning and zoning law, classify housing units participating in a home sharing arrangement in which at least one of the occupants is an elderly person who qualifies as a person of low or moderate income, as defined as very low income households. This would also incentivize local authorities to meet housing goals, and that would hold local authorities accountable when they fail to do so. I'm sure you're all aware of the deficit of low-income housing in our area. The next one is SP4 for dental insurance. This measure would memorialize the legislature and the governor to enact legislation that would require the Department of Insurance to commission a study to determine whether required Medi-Cal and private dental insurance plans provide increased dental coverage at low cost to seniors, and if that would result in lower costs to the state for emergency room visits and inpatient hospital treatment. Next one, number 8, is the AP17, electric vehicle charging stations. This measure would require any facility that provides electric vehicle charging stations for public use or common use to provide at least one van accessible station, regardless of when the electric vehicle charging stations were added to the facility. This is important because seniors are going to be more and more dependent on electric van transportation, and right now the charging stations that you see at the malls really can't accommodate the vans. AP15 is the homelessness, seniors, and persons with disabilities. This measure would propose that a count of the number of homeless individuals include the number of seniors and individuals with disabilities that are homeless. And finally, the next one is travel safety. This measure would require all hotels, motels, inns, and bed and breakfasts to install grab bars in the tub and shower areas and non-skid surfaces on tubs and shower floors in all rooms available for public accommodation. And then we also recommend 2 federal mandates or recommendations. The first one is Medicare durable medical equipment grab bars. Similar to what we talked about, this measure would memorialize the federal government to adopt appropriate regulations for the Medicare program or to enact appropriate legislation that would add grab bars to the list of covered durable medical equipment under the Medicare program upon an evaluation by the Medicare program to demonstrate that grab bars meet the requirements of durable medical equipment. And the second federal one is to remove the memorialize Congress and the President to adopt appropriate regulations for the Medicare program or to enact appropriate legislation that would prohibit Medicare late enrollment penalties related to the enrollment for Medicare's A, B, and D. If you're getting up towards the retirement age and you miss enrollment in Medicare, you're penalized. And many people feel seniors shouldn't be penalized. So these are the priorities that the California Senior Legislature has established for the year, and all of them have been picked up by sponsors in the Assembly or the state Senate, and we're working with them to try to see if some of these can be enacted in laws this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gitt. That excellent. All of them. Being a nurse for 50-some years, I can really see a lot of value in all of those. Again, I'd like to call on for B, the Ventura County Agency on Aging. Again, Commissioner Gitt, if you could give us our report.
Okay, so the second part of my report is on what we call the VC AAA. The California Aging Network consists of 33 area agencies on aging. The agencies coordinate, administer, and implement a wide range of programs, services, and advocacy efforts for older adults and persons with disabilities. In Ventura County, the agency is known as the VC AAA for Ventura County Area on Aging, and some of the programs that it administers are caregiver support, nutritious meals, legal advice, and much more than that. The next slide, Francine. So did you know that the senior population in California is the fastest growing demographic in the state? It is. And by 2030, there will be more seniors in the state than there are children. That's kind of interesting. So recent VC AAA activities, they have recently received a $1 million 3-year grant to provide dementia and Alzheimer's support. Part of the activities on this grant will include providing live-in community support for patients without having to go into a memory care facility. They plan to train Meals on Wheels drivers to recognize issues in homes that might indicate dementia, provide case management of individuals that live alone, and many of the other dementia-oriented services that are needed. In addition, the VC AAA continues to provide free dial-a-ride tickets and Medicare trips for seniors. I've talked about that before. If you're not aware of this program, you can get up to 20 free dial-a-ride tickets a month. All you have to be is over 60. And we can show you how to get that. You just go to the VC AAA website, and you can apply, or you can call them. As a part of the VC AAA activities, I went to Sacramento last week for something called C4A Capital Day. That's where all of the representatives from the 33 AAA agencies in the state come together and meet with the legislatures and staff personnel in Sacramento to share the insights on this year's state budget and issues facing the legislature, and of course concentrating on seniors. The biggest news for seniors this year, as you may have seen in the press, is the pro-aging position that our new Governor Newsom has taken on the growing senior population. And I'll quote from his State of the State speech: "It's time for a new master plan on aging. It must address person-centered care, the patchwork of public services, social isolation, bedlocked seniors in need of transportation, the nursing shortage, and demand for in-home supportive services that far outpaces its capacity." So as part of that, there are already about 8 new legislative bills that have already been picked up by various sponsors in the legislature, in the House and the Senate, to start to look at what the governor wants done this year. The first one, AB 920, is legislation requiring the Department of Aging to administer a grant program for the AAAs to fund transportation to and from non-emergency medical services in rural areas. That really doesn't affect us, but some of these others do. AB 1136 established the California Department of Community Living, which is a new department which will be dedicated to aging. AB 1137 will modernize the older Californians Act, which has been around for a long time but needs to be updated. AB 1287 will establish the master plan for an aging California that implements a no wrong door system to assist older adults and persons with disabilities. AB 1382 will establish a master plan of an aging California that responds to population needs in a comprehensive manner. SB 228, legislation to require that the governor appoint an aging czar, an aging task force to work with the various state departments and stakeholders to identify policies and priorities to prepare the state for the aging of its population. And AB 611 will establish a plan that addresses the housing needs of the California older adults. And there's more to come. The buzz in Sacramento is that this is really a new era. Governor Brown did a lot of things to bring us out of the recession, but he really wasn't interested in establishing new programs. And so the seniors really didn't get too much in the past few years. Now I think the time has come to address the problem because of the growing demographic. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Gitt. That was very, very informative. At last, we're going to see more of a voice for us in California. Next, we have Commissioner Posta, who will give us first item C, a report on the Global Adult Community Center. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Patty Hammett is the director of the Global Adult Community Center, and she couldn't be here today, so I'll have to fill in for a lot of important information about the center right now. The long-awaited renovations are underway at the center, where crews are installing new flooring and painting the interior of the entire 30-year-old building. It really needed it. However, while much of the center will be closed until Saturday, March 23rd, it is important to note that several activities will be going on as planned. On Monday, March 11th, the center will resume normal breakfast service. That's on March 11th, which takes place from 8:30 to 11 in the morning, Monday through Friday, in the dining room, as well as a senior nutrition lunch program that's on 11:30 to 12:30. The Global Senior Center's next edition of its popular music series is going to go on. The Beatles and Beyond. You probably all old enough to remember the Beatles, don't you? It'll take place as planned from 3 to 4:30 Sunday, March 17th, inside the main hall. You know, although it was sold out, as several of the programs, in fact, most of the programs are, we do have a standby list, and it seems like about 10% of the people don't show up, which we don't sell tickets for. So they're available if you want to go and do standby. Your chances are fairly good of really getting in. You know, you might get lucky, especially if you find a shamrock that day. That's March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, and you might get in. And it's a wonderful show. We've had them several times, and it's one of the best we have. So try to stop by. If you're also lucky, go to bingo. That'll resume on March 12th, and will continue thereafter every Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday from 1 to 1:30. Bingo starts promptly at 1, and you have to buy your tickets before 1 o'clock to get in. And we also have a St. Patrick's Day party. That's still going, but we're going to have it on March 15th. There'll be plenty of green beer in Blarney, and I hope you'll be able to come by, especially if you found the shamrock on that day, for your good luck. A ballroom dance also is scheduled for March 16th, and it will be held as what it was. So, the thing is off, but like piecemeal, we're trying to open up parts as they finish them. So if you have any questions on it, call up the Global Center, and they'll bring you up to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Posta. And again, Commissioner Posta, now item D, the COA Senior Volunteer Program.
Yeah, it's me again. Julie Spivak is the director of the COA Senior Volunteer Program, and she also, of course, can't be here. So I'll sub for her. The CSVP office will be closed during these while the entire building is getting its much-needed floors. However, the breakfast program and the nutrition program will resume, like I said, on March 11th. The CSVP free income tax program will continue. Actually, they're not held at the center. They take place every Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4, at the Caneo Creek South Community Building, which is just across the street from the Goebel, as well as at the Newberry Park Library on Wednesdays, 8:30 to 4 o'clock. Again, for any information you need on that, you can always call the Goebel Center. There'll be somebody handling the lines. Julie will be away from the office, so if you have any matter, do call at the Goebel Center and they can get in touch with her. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Posta, and thank you, Vice Chair Allen. We will now go to Commissioner reports, and I'd like to call on Commissioner Burt, who will discuss with us scams and frauds.
Thank you, Chair Gorback. Hi. I would like to talk to you a little bit about the scams and frauds that are targeting seniors. And this is personal in a sense because I actually received this message on my cell a couple of months ago. And the message was, hi, this is Sergeant Chris Cornell from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. And I have to speak with you immediately about a very sensitive issue. Here is my number. Would you call that number back? Okay, well, I did. I have a respect for law enforcement. It's in my family, but I did call the number back, and they said, by the way, Mr. Burt, we have a bench warrant for your arrest. And what it turned out to be is I didn't show up for a Los Angeles County, grand jury. And I said, well, I'm a Ventura County resident. How does that apply? Click. So what this says is that we're all targets. There's a number of scams out there, and I'm going to talk to you further about that. And by the way, I did call that particular substation at Lost Hills, and I asked the answering deputy whether or not a Chris Cornell worked there, was a sergeant there, and of course he was not, and that they told me, of course, this is a scam. So interesting for me, a learning experience, and as they say, we're never too old to learn. What are the common scams that are facing us as seniors? One of the most common is this grandparent scam. We've probably all been a target of it. By the way, the call comes in, your grandson, granddaughter is, had been a serious accident, is in the hospital, they need some money. Or they're in a foreign country, they took a trip and they're in jail. Well, in my particular case, I might ask the caller, by the way, how much money can I send you just to keep them a little while longer? Okay? On the lighter side. I don't think that really, that I would say that, but again, that's kind of one of the common ones. Obviously, we've probably all been a target of it, and it is in the overwhelming majority of cases, by the way, a scam. Always ask for the name. How did you, where are they specifically? If you know their location, but they're with your, daughter and son-in-law in Thousand Oaks, and he's in school somewhere. Obviously, it's a scam. But the first thing that comes to your mind should be, this is a scam, and how am I going to deal with it? Another one is the sweepstakes and lottery scam. They generally contact you by phone, email, or mail, and they say, by the way, you've won something. And we're going to need some money from you to pay the taxes, it's a processing fee, something like along those lines. And we'll make an electronic deposit of your winnings into your account. Now, if we've all heard recently, there was that huge lottery winner in South Carolina, $1.5 billion. Well, and I understand whoever they were, because in South Carolina, they don't have to divulge the name or the identity of the winner. But wouldn't $870 million, which is what they opted to take, be a nice electronic deposit in your particular account? And so I kind of checked that out, whether you're the first Wednesday, second, third, or fourth of the month in terms of whether you get a Social Security check or not. But I kind of calculated I'd have to add about an additional 5 zeros to my monthly deposit in order to be $500 million short of $870 million. So again, sweepstakes lottery, always be aware. Very few, things that you actually do win, but be concerned. Reach out to a friend. Check it out. What about the romance scam? We all probably have Facebook accounts, and maybe somebody contacted an isolated senior, and they may actually have put a picture up on their particular Facebook account. Sometimes these pictures are 40 years old, or they could be of a military personnel or somebody like that, and they're promising you romance. They want, and a senior who's isolated, sometimes that can fall prey to something like that, and they may target that particular senior on a regular basis over time. And by the way, send me a few $100s and maybe I'll come and visit you. And so there's that kind of situation, and we all have to be aware that it does go on. What it says is make sure you keep your Facebook accounts, your Instagram. If you're on Instagram, they can be private, and they can just be for the people that you know. And again, that's something that seems to go on. What about identity theft and medical fraud theft? Someone gets your personal information and runs up bills in your name. Can that happen? Obviously it can. Have you been the target of that? Possibly. Maybe you've been lucky. What you need to do, of course, is always check your credit card statements. Always check your bank statements. Make sure there haven't been any unauthorized withdrawals. It's a monthly exercise, which we all need to do. And I think that if you do that, you will be obviously less, apt to be the target of that kind of fraud. I'm not recommending that anybody pay a fee for identity theft protection. However, in your particular case, it's something you may want to investigate. It's not that expensive. Whether or not it's going to be of benefit remains, to you. One of the things that I also wanted to mention, there are certain limits to your liability. If your credit card is stolen, your liability under federal law is $50, as long as you can prove, of course, that the additional charges that are on the card were really not made by you. However, if you carry 8 credit cards in your wallet, it's $50 per card. So again, that could, add up to some money, but it is $50 per card, and that's under federal law. So we all should feel safe if we carry 1 or 2 cards that the limit of our liability isn't that high. When it comes to ATM or debit cards, most of us probably carry an ATM or a debit card. Every time you go to the bank, they always ask you to swipe your ATM or debit. In that situation, your liability is different. And I'm going to read to you a little bit about what the federal law is on ATM and debit cards. This is sensitive in terms of reporting it as quickly as possible. But if you report your ATM or debit card within 2 business days after you learn about the loss or theft, your limit of liability is only $50. However, if it's more than 2 days, but less than 60 days, it goes up to $500. And if it's more than 60 days, it's an interesting situation because it's unlimited, and you all should be aware of that. If you have an ATM or a debit card that's linked to other accounts, maybe it's linked to a brokerage account. Who knows? You could be on the hook for additional liability up into the amount that is charged. So what this means is be vigilant, report those discrepancies as quickly as possible, but always, again, check your statements monthly. I'm going to go through some of the common fraud prevention tips. Don't answer the phone. Hide under your pillow. Obviously, we're going to answer the phone. When I say don't answer the phone, or when they say don't answer the phone, what this means to me is most of us use cell phones. We can have a contact list. Every time, keep that list updated. It's really important to do that. You know who's coming, who's calling you. If it's a number you don't recognize, whether it's from a particular city, it's from Sioux City, Iowa, or I just got a call from someone in North Dakota. Obviously, I realize I don't know anybody in North Dakota. What's nice about, our iPhones is that what's nice about our iPhones is that it identifies the city that's being called. Don't wire money. Don't send money. Obviously, those are things that you don't want to do. If you don't use public Wi-Fi, however, not to use public Wi-Fi for financial information, especially. You may be in a situation where you don't want to get on your brokerage account, you don't want to get on your bank account. Social media, keep them private if you can. If you feel you've been the target of something, or somebody's, reach out to a friend, reach out to somebody that and check it out. Ask someone, check your statements, is what I've mentioned to you before. What are the red flags? Insistence, you need to do something immediately. Demands, you act now, or you snooze and you lose. Refusal, you tell them, please don't call, and they continue to call. Secrets, don't tell anybody. Make sure you don't tell your family, your friends. Unprofessional, bad spelling, grammar, we've all seen that too. Promises, they're going to send you something immediately as long as you make your deposits. What are the agencies that are helping us? Local law enforcement. It is important to report all scams to the local police or sheriff. There's a fraud hotline phone number there. You've got the FBI takes reports on all scams. There's a website. Federal Trade Commission takes reports of all types. There's a particular phone number. Postal inspectors, if it goes through the mail across state lines, they will take a report. It's a federal crime. Senior Medicare Patrol, if you suspect your Medicare account information has been misused, there's a phone number. Department of Consumer Affairs, State of California, there's also an additional number. If I can leave you with one particular note, it's, again, be vigilant, check your statements monthly, and keep your iPhone or Android phone, keep the contact list updated so you know who's actually calling you. Thank you.
Wow, great information. Thank you very much, Commissioner Burt. I'd like now to call on Commissioner Maria. This is Section 6B on our agenda regarding Senior of the Year.
Thank you, Chair Gorbach. Every year, the Council on Aging sponsors a Senior of the Year award and social at the Goebel Center. And so I want everybody to mark your calendars. This year's ceremony award and ceremony is going to be June 13th at the Goebel Center. And more importantly, our nomination window is open right now. So if you know of personally or are affiliated with an organization or business that may be interested in nominating a senior volunteer, our nomination period is open right now. The deadline's April 1st, and you can go to toaks.org/seniors to get the information and the criteria. But we really want to get a lot of nominations and recognize all those seniors that do so much for our community. It's a great event. Thank you.
And thank you very much. This is the best event of the year. Mark it on your calendar. It's wonderful, it's fun, it's uplifting, and you don't want to miss this. Again, that's June 13th. And thank you to Commissioner Maria and her subcommittee for all the work they're doing on this. I'd now like to call on Commissioner Mortimer, who will introduce our guest speaker today.
Thank you, Karen. Dr. Sarkissian pursued her undergraduate degree at UCLA, receiving a Bachelor of Science in Evolutionary Biology. Her passion for medicine led her to Michigan State University College of Human Medicine, where she obtained her medical degree. She then further trained in internal medicine at the UCLA Olive View Residency Program, where she developed an interest in managing chronic conditions such as diabetes and heart disease, as well as an interest in preventive medicine. She is passionate about effectively communicating with patients and empowering them with knowledge,
customized treatment plans, and an integrated approach to complex health issues. Please welcome Dr. Diana Sarkissian.
Topic that I think can be quite challenging at times. We're going to be talking about vitamins and supplements today and how we can get these through nutrition and which ones we actually need to supplement on a daily basis. So the reason I say this can be a challenging topic is because there's a lot of conflicting opinions and conflicting data, and I want to make the topic a little bit clearer for us today and give you a way to approach it so that you can apply these to your life. So before we even start, we need to talk about how prevalent taking supplements is. And if we look at the data done by the Council for Responsible Nutrition, 68% of Americans were taking supplements back in 2015. So that's about 70% now. So most of us in this room are probably taking supplements regularly. And when we look at the demographics for who these individuals are, we actually see that they're mostly older individuals, greater than 65 years of age. Interestingly, more women than men take the vitamins. And the ones who do, the 70% we're talking about, tend to be a lot more health conscious. So they're actually healthier to start with. They're less likely to smoke, they have a lower BMI, and they're typically more physically active. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. When we look at healthcare professionals who take vitamins and supplements, a large proportion of us do. So when the Life Supplemented Healthcare Professionals Impact Study came out, they found that at one point or another, 72% of physicians and 89% of nurses use vitamins and supplements. And this number came out to about 50% of physicians who use it regularly. So quite prevalent. And it becomes challenging because there's just so much noise out there about the supplements and vitamins. Every day there's a new headline about which supplement we should be taking to prevent cancer, and then a few months later we are disappointed to find out that these same vitamins and supplements potentially carry risks. So it can be quite challenging to sort this out, and that's my goal today. Give you a framework for how to think about these and maybe explain why there's so much conflicting data out there. Okay? So the way we're going to approach this is an evidence-based approach. This is how all clinical recommendations really should come about. And there are different tiers of studies that we're going to be talking about as we approach some of the supplements. The lowest tier, in my opinion, is the observational study. These look at a group of individuals, pick out the ones that are taking a certain vitamin or supplement, and maybe follow them over a few years to see how they do. A lot of the headlines, the compelling headlines that we see, come out of these observational studies, but they're really low tier. You should not base clinical recommendations on these because any correlation seen in these studies does not imply causation, and there are a lot of confounding factors that come into play that really need to be sorted out. So we do need the randomized control or clinical trials. This is where you take two groups, one group who takes the supplement or vitamin, and one who takes the placebo. And then we follow those two groups along a period of time to look at the outcome. This is really a much better study. However, if you really want to make a generalized statement about a vitamin or supplement, you really should be looking at this third tier, which is the systematic review and meta-analysis. And this takes into account, let me see if my animation will work. Yes. This takes into account all the good quality randomized control trials, kind of picks them out like the magnet, throws them into this little filter, and plots out the data that's a pooled data, basically looking at all of the data, what's kind of the conclusion at the end. And that's what I love to look at when I make recommendations. So we'll be talking about that. And the supplement types that we'll be discussing will be the vitamins, A, E, C, D, B12. I do want to throw in the multivitamins in there as well because I think that's a different category. The minerals we'll be talking about will focus on calcium, and I'll briefly mention the fatty acids in terms of fish oil because there's been a lot of information about that. So when we talk about vitamins, there's two types. There's fat-soluble, water-soluble. They're organic compounds, so they're made of carbon, and they're really essential for all of our body functions. I won't go into it, but every organ and metabolic process really depends on these. And it's important to note that they can act as antioxidants. And we'll be talking about why that's important in a second. When we talk about the minerals, they're really inorganic, so no carbon compound in them. And these two are essential to our body functions. They do form the components of vitamins, hormones, and enzymes in the bone and tissues. So we'll focus on calcium. Omega-3 fatty acids, we really know them as the fish oils. They're important in lipid management and regulating our blood vessels and platelets, and really in terms of cardiovascular health, they've been talked about a lot. So let's talk about the antioxidants, and I think this is a great example to show you how observational studies and then the real evidence that comes later can be so conflicting. So with the antioxidants, we're going to talk about vitamin A, and the precursor of vitamin A is beta-carotene, and this is what we can obtain through our nutrition. We're going to talk about vitamin E and vitamin C. So these are antioxidants, and we hear about antioxidants all the time. They are great because they can prevent the damage done by free radicals. And free radicals can accumulate in our body from external exposure to UV light, radiation, smoking, but they can also accumulate internally from normal metabolic processes that go on a daily basis. And these free radicals are thought to contribute to a lot of the chronic diseases of aging. So a lot of the cancers that we see, skin changes that we see as we age, and any other chronic condition, that there is a role for the free radicals, So if the antioxidants can then prevent some of this damage, that's wonderful. And the beta-carotene that I mentioned can come from red, yellow, orange fruits and vegetables. So carrots are really well known for containing beta-carotene, but spinach, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, all of those pictured above. So really, when we take too much of beta-carotene through our diet, the only toxicity we know of is just some skin yellowing, but not a whole lot else because we can't take in that much vitamin A through our diet to cause issues. So when we looked at observational data for beta-carotene, we saw that the individuals that had higher beta-carotene in their blood, because we can measure it, actually got lower rates of cancer. And here's the antioxidant at work, right? They particularly got lower incidence of lung cancer. So this was really exciting, and it made headlines, and people probably started drinking a lot of carrot juice. But then this pivotal study came out, the CARROT trial, where this was actually a randomized controlled trial. So they looked at 18,000 individuals who actually were smokers or former smokers. They were older, above the age of 45. And when we followed them for 4 years, we saw that the group who got the beta-carotene, 30 milligrams, and the vitamin A, 25,000 units, which is quite a bit, actually ended up doing worse than the group who didn't. This was huge, right? They actually ended up having a higher incidence of lung cancer. So look at that. And this is kind of the point that I want to run home today. So what's the bottom line? What do we do about the different vitamins and the amounts? Because we certainly don't want to incur harm, right? And I think a good way of looking at the bottom line is looking at the dietary reference intakes that are established in the U.S. by the National Academy of Sciences, the National Research Council, and the Institute of Medicine. And these societies really look at all of the data, and they come up with a number that is safe and essential to consume on a daily basis. And if we go off of the recommended dietary allowance, we'll ensure that we have enough of the vitamin or mineral, and that we're not hitting the tolerable upper intake level, which they also list, which could potentially cause harm. So that's how I really like to approach these vitamins and supplements. So when we look at the recommended doses, and these do get updated every few years, the first line is vitamin A, and it's listed in micrograms. You can see that for those of us above the age of 51, that's towards the right side of the chart, the females need about 700 micrograms, and the males is recommended to get about 900. And this is just a larger view of that, and it's pretty easy to get this amount through the diet. And the upper limit, tolerable limit for vitamin A, you can see here is listed as 3,000 micrograms or about 10,000 international units. So it's much less than the individuals in the study who received 25,000 international units. So that's a good way of kind of gauging how much of the vitamin you should be getting and not taking too much. So let's talk about vitamin E next. This is a great vitamin found in wheat germ, egg yolk, vegetable oil, nuts, and green vegetables, everything in that picture. And the recommendation currently, the RDA, is about 15 international units for both men and women. Having a deficiency in this is pretty rare because it's found in a lot of the food groups. And when we looked at the observational studies for vitamin E, we looked at these female nurses, and they had no baseline history of cancer, stroke, or heart disease, and we followed them for 8 years, and guess what? Those who were taking vitamin E had a reduction in heart disease. They were taking more than 200 international units daily, and this is really what's found in supplements, greater than 200 units. So now let's talk about the randomized trials. We looked at the women's health study, still looking at women. This was published back in 2005. We looked at 40,000 healthy women. They were older than 45. Separated them into 2 groups. One group got about 600 international units every other day. So that does average to about 200, 300 a day. And guess what? There was absolutely no benefit in the 2 groups. So, sorry to keep disappointing you, but let's talk about vitamin C next. Vitamin C is another great antioxidant found all over the place, and emergency, the formulation, and people love taking this to prevent colds. Well, when we look at vitamin C supplementation of greater than about 500 milligrams daily, there was a reduction in colds. There was a 50% reduction in colds, and the frequency and the intensity, like the duration. But this reduction really was only in individuals who were under a lot of physical stress, like marathon runners, soldiers. In the general population, there was a 10% reduction in the duration. So, well, maybe a little bit of a benefit, but not as much as we would have liked. And when we look at the randomized control trials for these, and we look at physicians, actually the Physicians' Health Study, and they looked at 500 milligrams a day of supplementation, there was absolutely no association with heart disease or cancer, so it had no benefit again, even though it's a great antioxidant. So bottom line here, when we look at the meta-analysis, so all of the good randomized controlled trials, we look at the pooled data, what did it show? Well, they looked at 47 randomized controlled trials, and there was actually a harm in taking too much of these supplements. Vitamin A showed a 16% increase in all-cause mortality, so in death. The beta-carotene showed a 7% increase, and vitamin E and vitamin C, the results were not statistically significant, but there was still a little bit of an increase when we take them too much. So I'm going to talk about B12 next, because I think B12 has a little bit better results when we look at the data. B12, unlike the antioxidants, you actually can have a deficiency in as you get older. So it's really rare to be deficient in the antioxidants, but B12 has a 10 to 15% chance. You have a 10 to 15% chance of being deficient after the age of 60. And this is because of the way B12 is absorbed. So as we get older, it's more likely to develop atrophic gastritis, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. And this can affect the absorption of B12 from our diet, and so deficiency is more common. And sometimes medications that we take as we get older can affect the absorption, one being metformin, which is a typical drug used to treat diabetes, and we tend to develop type 2 diabetes as we get older. So again, absorption can really be affected. When we look at the RDAs, like we did for vitamin A, the recommended amount for B12 is 2.4 micrograms. So it's a pretty small amount. Now, what's going on with the absorption of vitamin B12? Well, B12, as we know, is found in meat products. So when we obtain it through our diet, it is bound to a protein as part of the meat. And we need to be able to break that up and then absorb it into our bloodstream. Well, as we get older, our stomach lining can undergo inflammation, and we may lose the pepsin and the acid that's really required to break that bond with the protein and the B12. In addition, we may miss out on the intrinsic factor, which is a specific factor, again, made by the stomach, that can bind that free B12 and absorb it into our system. So if we're missing any of those in the process, we miss out on the absorption of the B12. However, if you take crystalline B12, which is the formulation in supplements, that does not require the same process, and so you're more likely to absorb that. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we're not deficient in vitamin B12. We can check it in the bloodstream and make sure there's no deficiency, and we can ensure that we're getting at least a 2.4, partly through the diet and maybe a little bit of a supplement. But what about high doses of B12? If we know B12 is so important for our nervous system, will it help us with cognition and the typical cognitive decline that occurs with aging? So we did look at studies, and we saw that high doses of vitamin B12, again, these are multiple studies pooled together, and the overall consensus is no. There was really no benefit in taking higher doses of B12. While a deficiency can really harm us and cause issues with our nervous system, taking more is not protective. So next, we'll talk about vitamin D. So vitamin D has become like the vitamin du jour. Everyone's checking it, everyone's taking it. A lot of research has been done on this. And initially, it was proposed that taking vitamin D really helped with autoimmune disease, cancer, cardiovascular disease, depression, dementia, infectious disease. And unfortunately, there's just not enough supporting evidence to say that it does. Where we do have evidence that supports vitamin D supplementation is in bone health and decreasing fracture risk. Some studies say that there's a small benefit in preventing falls. There's some conflict there too, but I'm going to put it in the benefit section for us. So just really briefly, we know vitamin D and calcium's role in bone health. We really need the vitamin D in order to prevent osteoporosis and prevent kind of the leakage of calcium out of the bone that then leads to those porous bones that are prone to fracture. Vitamin D helps us absorb calcium, and it also prevents the leakage of calcium out of bone, so it has two roles. And when we look at all of the data, I won't take you through the studies. I think you're getting the gist of it now. When we look at all of the data, the bottom line is that we need to make sure we're not deficient in vitamin D to allow for optimal bone health. And we do check vitamin D often, and we've seen that having a level greater than 20 to 30 really is a sufficient level. Being deficient, having a level less than 12, is potentially harmful and can lead to more bone loss. So we want to be in that sufficient range. And we can get to that sufficient range most of the time by taking in about 600 international units of vitamin D daily. This is particularly important for females, but also relevant for males because they are prone to osteoporosis as well, but just at a slightly older age, around the 70s. So with vitamin D, we mostly get this through the sun, and we don't encourage a lot of sun exposure due to the risks. So a supplement of vitamin D is not a bad idea. You want to make sure that you're getting about 600 units. Some of us may require more, and that can be determined by checking the level in the blood. And a lot of people ask, well, what kind of vitamin D supplement should I be using? There are really two main ones, the D3 and the D2 formulations. And the D2 is less commonly found. The D3 is more prominent, and I do recommend the D3. The D2 is a form found in plant life, and this is mostly used in chronic kidney disease patients. The rest of us really benefit from D3 that's synthesized in the body, and it's naturally derived, and it really helps increase the D levels, much more than the D2. Okay, so moving on to calcium. Calcium and vitamin D do really work together, so you do need to have sufficient amounts of both for optimal bone health. In addition, calcium has multiple roles in our body: muscle contraction, cellular metabolism. It also helps with all of our nervous system impulses. So we want to make sure we have enough calcium. And for a while, clinicians were really recommending 1,200 milligrams of calcium supplements daily. And a lot of the vitamin D supplements come with calcium together. And then recently, we made headlines again saying that calcium supplements showed a 30% increase in heart attack. So that really scared people from taking calcium. So again, what's the bottom line with this? What does the overall research show? Well, looking at all of these trials here, we took a look at individuals who were taking calcium through the diet versus those who were taking high amounts of calcium through supplements. And the first chart over here is through the diet. So this is on the left-hand side of the screen. And when we look at the overall risk, that's the pooled data in the bottom. So those taking in a lot of calcium through the diet actually ended up having a decreased risk of heart attack and stroke, a slightly decreased risk. And then on the other side, we have the high calcium through supplements. And when we look at that pooled data at the bottom here, we're seeing a 1.01 relative risk, which means that there's a 0.01 increase, which really didn't come out to be statistically significant. And there's a slight decrease in stroke. So overall, the data, when we pool it all together, is not suggestive that calcium supplements do increase cardiovascular disease. However, the recommendation now, still keeping in mind all of this, is if we are going to supplement, we really should supplement around 500 milligrams. That's been shown to be the safest in terms of not raising our cardiovascular risk. Our goal still is to get 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams daily, and this really should be through the diet, if possible. And again, people tend to ask what kind of calcium supplement to take because there are different formulations. The main ones are the citrate and the calcium carbonate. And the difference here is really on how they're absorbed. And most of the time, I will recommend the citrate because it doesn't depend on the acid in our stomach for absorption. And a lot of us are on proton pump inhibitors for reflux disease. And so that can inhibit our absorption of calcium carbonate, but it will not affect the calcium citrate. So it's just safer to go that route for most individuals. And then very briefly, I'm going to talk about the fatty acids, being fish oil. So the importance of the fatty acids is really the ratio of the 3 omega-3s to the omega-6s. The omega-6s can increase inflammation in our body. And they're found in kind of the modern Western diet. When you eat out, a lot of the corn oil and soybean and sunflower oil that's used to cook the food can raise our omega-6s. And so what we want to do is we want to balance that ratio. We want to increase the omega-3s in our body. And these are really found in fish and nuts and, of course, fish oil. So for many years, we did lots of studies looking at the omega-3s and whether or not they had cardioprotective effects. Did they help our cardiovascular health? And very recently, there was a nice little review that came out. They looked at all the randomized controlled trials and, again, didn't really see a consistent benefit. But at least there was no harm. So I think what I've tried to show you is that mega doses of these vitamins really haven't been shown to be helpful and in some cases can be harmful. What about the multivitamins? Centrum Silver, for instance. I don't know, there's so many for seniors particularly. These are different because they don't represent the mega dosing, and the primary goal of these multivitamins is not to prevent disease by overdosing you with the vitamins, it's really to prevent deficiency. And for a while, good studies on multivitamins were missing. There were lots of observational studies, and they were really inconsistent. Some showed some benefits, some showed none. And then this Physicians' Health study came out, which I think is really interesting. They looked at 50-year-old male physicians, about 14,000 of them, and they followed them for 11 years, and they divided them up into a group that got the multivitamin and the group that didn't. And when we followed them for 11 years, we saw that there really was no benefit in preventing, which one is this? I'm having a hard time reading my chart, in preventing heart disease, so cardiovascular disease. As you can see, kind of the group that got the placebo or the sugar pill and the group that got the Centrum Silver had the same rates of cardiovascular disease. Where there was a difference was actually in cancer. So individuals who started the study with no baseline history of cancer, there was no benefit for them. But those individuals who already had a baseline history of cancer actually benefited from taking a multivitamin. And that's the second chart where you can see the two lines are definitely distinctly separated. So multivitamins seem to be helpful in preventing future cancer in those individuals that already had a baseline history. And then there was also a benefit in cataracts. A multivitamin, Centrum Silver, showed to decrease the risk of cataract or the incidence of cataracts, as well as the need for cataract surgery. So that was an interesting study, and it was just one randomized controlled trial. So obviously we're going to need more in order to pool the data and kind of really be able to determine what we should do about multivitamins. So I think overall, there's a lot of information here and a lot of studies. The take-home points here, really, I want you to follow the tenets of Hippocrates. Hippocrates is considered the father of medicine. He really knew what he was talking about, even though it was back in 300 BC without the research. And the first teaching that he had is let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And I think most clinicians will agree that a healthy, colorful, varied diet will ensure that we have no deficiencies in vitamins and minerals. And the second tenet here is that everything in excess is opposed to nature. And we saw that with the high doses of the vitamins and supplements. So if you're going to take a vitamin or supplement in moderation, try to follow the recommended dietary allowances set forth by the different organizations and try not to exceed it. And then lastly, but perhaps most importantly, first, do no harm. So if you are going to take something, discuss it with your physician. Make sure that it doesn't interact with any of the other medications you're taking, and make sure that in an effort to improve your health, you're not causing any harm. And I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. What a wonderful presentation. We're going to have, may we take a couple of questions from the dais now? I'm going to start. I have one question. Is there any advantage to purchasing more expensive organic vitamins and supplements as opposed to the less expensive drugstore variety of the same thing?
Any answer I provide will probably be opinion at this point because there hasn't been the good quality studies to support it. I would say probably not. It really depends on the ingredients that we're talking about. So I think it would be a little more specific to which supplement or vitamin we're discussing. But looking at the ingredients, some have additives and perhaps the organic version does not. So it would kind of depend on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any other questions up here? Commissioner Posta?
I always seem to have good questions I got today for you, which may or may not be you able to answer. But, you know, I'm a little bit older than probably the average people here, and I have plenty of time. I'm retired, you know, to study things and do all of that. You gave me so much information. There's such a thing as information overload. I mean, how am I going to keep track? I have trouble, you know, taking my weight every day, much less figuring every apple and every orange and every, you know, kohlrabi or whatever it is, what the milligrams of B12 are and How do I keep track of that?
That's a great question. And I don't think you need to be that specific. Some of the same organizations that came up with the guidelines I talked about also came up with nutrition guidelines where they recommend, for instance, 5 to 7 servings of a fruit or vegetable daily. So if you hit that goal, it's pretty, I can say confidently that you'll hit the goals of the different minerals and vitamins. So you don't have to be too specific in calculating it out.
Well,
And a discussion with your physician will also help.
yeah, well, I'm never too specific. Second question, and this is important. I mean, it's always bothered me. The FDA, regulates all kinds of drugs or new drugs that come out.
Yeah.
They're always helping. You got to do these tests and retests and double-blind studies and
Yep.
all this stuff. And all of this stuff that comes from China or India or anything, these herbs and all that stuff, they come in bottles. Nobody's ever checked them to see how good they are, or are they adulterated? Do they cause harm?
Yep.
Why doesn't the FDA do that? I just cannot believe that they don't regulate that. They regulate
Yeah.
drugs that are tested and tested and tested, but stuff that has no testing, no regulation.
Yeah, and I
Why
think
is that?
I think as clinicians we ask that question every day, and I don't have a good answer for you.
Is that politics or probably?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You have another question?
No, that was just going to mention thalidomide.
That's a
Okay,
great
yes.
point.
Call
Yes.
that, yeah.
Vice Chair Allen.
Yes, for people who take iron, because many of the seniors take iron, I've heard that it is beneficial to take vitamin C, that the iron is absorbed more appropriately. What are your
So
thoughts
2
on that?
points. One, studies or the jury's out on whether or not the vitamin C helps the absorption. So there's a little bit of a conflicting data. I always say it's not going to hurt. While you're on the iron, take the vitamin C to ensure that appropriate absorption. But the second point here I want to make is that we don't all need iron. And if we don't need it, we may be causing harm. So we should take it only when we are deficient.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Burt.
Dr. Sarkisian, great presentation. Unfortunately for me, I'm going to have to throw out a lot of bottles when I get home. And I actually did purchase some sushi at the market for dinner, so that's gone. All right, and I think at this point, the only thing I'm going to eat from now on are radishes and yams. But what I was told, I did visit a nutritionist, and what I got from her was that aspect in the slide that you showed of colorful. Make sure your plate looks colorful. If it does, not necessarily are you hitting every target, but that's probably the best way to ensure that you are getting what you actually need on a daily basis. And so, for somebody like myself who, was a white bread, white rice, that kind of regimen, to obviously substitute the brown rice and to do the other things to make that plate more colorful with the greens, the oranges, the reds, those kinds of things, the chickpeas. So that's what I was told, and I've been following that, and I'm still vertical. So I don't know if I'm going to continue based upon what you said, but thank you. I thought it was a wonderful presentation, and you hit all of the really important things that we need to hear. Thank you.
Does that include, Commissioner Burt, 3 different colors of Haagen-Dazs ice cream?
The random blind studies have shown that actually McConnell's, if you're going, forgetting the Haagen-Dazs, you go to McConnell's, then you've got some valid point there, John.
Yeah, but Santa Barbara's too far to go,
Well, that's calcium, though, isn't it? Yes, we need calcium. We're good. Okay, Commissioner Gitt.
Good presentation, thank you. My eye doctor has recommended that I take AREDS 2, which stands for Age-Related Eye Disease Studies, and it has C, E, zinc, copper, lutein, and zeaxanthin in it. And their claim to fame is that they've done all these studies, and it's going to prevent all the eye diseases that I could ever have. Do you have any comment on AREDS 2?
Yeah, so there have been studies with those ingredients that can potentially have some benefit in preventing macular degeneration. So not all the diseases that affect the eye, but specifically macular degeneration. And so far from what I've seen, the information is compelling. There may be a benefit, but I think it's a little too soon to kind of come up with a conclusion. So if I were to recommend it in someone who has a family history of macular degeneration or maybe has beginning macular degeneration, I think it's not a bad idea because so far the information has been compelling.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the desk? Okay, and once again, let's give a round of applause to Dr. Sarkisian. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll now continue with our meeting, and we are on section number 8, Commissioner Comments. Let me start down here at my left with Commissioner Gitt. Any comments? No? Comments? Okay.
February was Dental Health Month for dogs, so I think we should make March Dental Health for seniors. So if you haven't seen your dentist, one of the biggest problems in aging is incorrect nutrition due to bad teeth or things like that. So check in with your dental hygienist or your endodontist or whoever you need to keep your teeth.
Thank you. Let's go to this side now. Do we have any commissioner comments? Commissioner comments?
No, the only thing I would say is that was a fantastic talk, and I enjoyed it very much, even though it had too many facts there. But, but it was very helpful, I'm sure, to everybody that listened to it, and thank you so much.
Thank you. And I have some comments now to round out our meeting today. First of all, as always, I want to thank my friends and my fellow commissioners for all the work you did this month to prepare this meeting and bring our speaker here. And these reports take a lot of planning, and it's all very much appreciated. So thank you very much. And then secondly, I wanted to mention that the Thousand Oaks Library, as they do every year, is sponsoring the One City, One Book Club. And this year's book is Rocket Men by Robert Kurson. I will tell you something. I got so sucked into, how if you were in a space capsule and they opened the door, you'd get sucked out. I got sucked into this book. If you were at all interested in following the space program during the 1960s, you have to read this book. This is just amazing. This brings you not only into the Apollo 8 capsule, this book brings you into the living rooms of the 3 astronauts, and you learn about their families and their wives and their kids. And, during the Apollo 8 mission, they were all very close-knit, because they wanted to provide emotional support to each other. And the traditional food to bring when you visited each other's homes was a platter of deviled eggs and a bottle of champagne. And just little items like that. So interesting. So this author, Robert Kurson, is going to be featured. He's going to be speaking Sunday, April 7th from 2 to 4 at the Civic Arts Plaza. And tickets are required. I believe they're free, and you can pick them up at either of the libraries here in town. But yeah, give this one just a little bit of your time. You will enjoy it. Rocket Man by Robert Kurson. Okay, so our next televised meeting is going to be Wednesday, April 3rd, right here. We have a real good crowd here today, and it's so nice to see all of you. We don't have our speaker right now for me to announce, but it will be on our website very soon. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.